This is Mac OS Ken.
The China iPhone ban fear takes hold, important security updates from Apple, and sprechen Sie Apple TV Plus. It is Friday, the 8th of September, 2023. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSCan. While Wednesday was something of a mystery, there seemed to be one big thing dragging down Apple shares on Thursday. That thing was China. I told you yesterday of the drop for the market as a whole and Apple shares in particular on Wednesday. The 4 reasons run up the flagpole as possible downers for Apple included general concerns around inflation, Apple being deemed a gatekeeper under the EU's Digital Markets Act, news from TrendForce that cast doubt on anticipated iPhone 15 Pro Max sales, and word that China had banned iPhone use for some government workers and employees. Some or all of that led Apple shares down $6.79 on Wednesday, a decline of just over 3.5%, closing at $182.91. On Thursday, amplification of one of those stories led to a drop for Apple shares that was almost as steep. Ticker symbol AAPL ended Thursday down 5.35, a decline of 2.9%, closing at 177.56. While several factors factored in Wednesday, Thursday seems to have been all China all the time. On Wednesday, the Wall Street Journal cited secret sources saying that China had ordered officials at central government agencies not to use iPhones and other foreign-branded devices for work or bring them into the office. On Thursday, a Reuters report cited secret sources saying similar stuff. Quoting that report, China has in recent weeks widened existing curbs on the use of iPhones by state employees, telling staff at some central government agencies to stop using their Apple mobiles at work, 2 sources familiar with the matter said. Two sources with whom the Apple watching world cannot confer and from whom the Apple watching world cannot hear. And it keeps getting weirder. While reports this week say the rumored ban is an extension of a ban that's been around for years, one of the Reuters sources says they've not been told when they're actually supposed to stop using their iPhone. Meanwhile, a third source tells the news organization that he is still using his iPhone and hasn't heard anything about a restriction, while a fourth source says iPhone use hasn't been banned, so much as discouraged. Can 2 people really have done this? Caused the sales of millions upon millions of dollars of iPhone shares? Yeah, probably not. All the uncertainty that was out there Wednesday was still out there on Thursday. The Reuters report may have compounded things, though, and same goes for a report from Bloomberg. Probably more so. That site's Jenny Leonard and Debbie Wu brought word Thursday that was more scary, though no more certain. Quoting that piece, China plans to expand the ban on the use of iPhones and sensitive departments to government-backed agencies and state companies, a sign of growing challenges for Apple in its biggest foreign market and global production base. That is according to people familiar with the matter. You know the kind, the ones who ask not to be identified discussing a sensitive matter. While some folks with whom Reuters spoke said things like, "Ban? What ban? And I got no idea when this ban's supposed to start." Bloomberg says several agencies have been instructing staff not to bring their iPhones to work, people familiar with the matter said, affirming a previous report from the Wall Street Journal. In addition, Beijing intends to extend that restriction far more broadly to a plethora of state-owned enterprises and other government-controlled organizations. The piece goes on to say it's unclear how many companies or agencies could eventually adopt restrictions on personal devices, and there's been no formal or written injunction as yet, the people said. Well, might as well go ahead and freak out anyway. The Reuters report had D.A. Davidson analyst Tom Fort saying, "We believe the restrictions have the potential to slow Apple's sales growth in China. This could provide an additional challenge for the company, as its revenues from China have already been negatively impacted by a challenging macroeconomic environment in that country." Fort's got a hold rating on Apple shares. His price target on the shares is $180. Citi analysts cited in the Reuters piece say the market may have overreacted to the news flow amidst weak confidence overall. They pointed out, as the Wall Street Journal did Wednesday, that something similar happened with Tesla back in 2021. Word came of a Tesla ban in China for military staff and employees of key state-owned companies. Tesla shares and shares of its suppliers got hammered for a bit. Then those shares recovered, and Tesla is still selling well in China. Citi has a buy rating on Apple shares. The firm's price target on the shares is $240. A piece from Investing.com has a couple of other firms weighing in. BofA analysts cited by that site are running numbers based on a possible iPhone ban. In a note to clients, the firm said, "China accounts for roughly 40 to 50 million iPhone units for Apple. We estimate up to a 5 million to 10 million unit headwind if such a ban were to go through and subsequently be enforced. Additionally, if iPhones are banned from being carried into official workplaces, the impact could be higher given the high propensity of Chinese consumers to own and carry multiple phones. The prior foreign-branded laptop ban announced in 2022 allowed for a 2-year timeframe to comply. It remains unclear what the timing of this potential ban would be." BofA has a hold rating on Apple shares. The firm's price target on the shares is $210. We're actually going to shift to more positive takes in a moment, but there's one point tied to the negatives that has turned up in a number of stories I've spotted. Huawei has a new phone out, one that many say put it back on par with Apple's iPhone. According to Wednesday's piece from the Wall Street Journal, iPhone has gotten a boost over the past few years in China after U.S. sanctions hit rival Huawei's ability to make 5G phones. That was followed by a few words on the new phone from Huawei. Thursday's piece from Bloomberg brought that up as well. Last week, said that site, the release of a Huawei technology smartphone that contained an advanced made-in-China processor caused a stir on both sides of the Pacific. State media celebrated an early triumph against harsh U.S. sanctions. That brings us back to Investing.com, and one more negative note. That site has analysts at Oppenheimer saying, "The government ban and the new Huawei phone will be material events for the iPhone. The two combined will drive more Android users to upgrade to the Huawei, or iPhone users going back to Huawei." Of course, that assumes the ban is actually happening, which remains to be seen. As things stand, the firm sees Apple losing as many as 20 million iPhone sales in 2024. Oppenheimer seems to believe that 10 million are as good as gone already, thanks to the new Huawei phone. Should the rumored ban actually happen, that could cost Apple another 5 million to 10 million iPhone sales in the firm's estimation. Oppenheimer has a buy rating on Apple shares. The firm's price target on the shares is $220. Sliding to the positive side, Evercore analyst Amit Daryanani seems to see talk of a ban in China as sound and fury, signifying nothing. Apple 3.0 ran a blurb from the analyst. The way he sees it, if such a ban were to happen, it could hurt Apple's bottom line. But Evercore's China team doesn't see such a ban happening unless Apple begins moving supply chains out of China at a rate that makes China uncomfortable. Back in 2019, Apple said it supported 5 million jobs in China. Assuming it's still supporting that number or more, Daryanani says it would be difficult for the Chinese government to take a more material action against Apple without impacting Chinese jobs. He wraps his note saying, "We think this is more of a headline issue versus something that will have a material impact on financial performance, given government officials were likely already avoiding Apple products." Daryanani has an outperform rating on Apple shares. His price target on the shares is $210. And finally, word from the most positive of Apple's positive people over the past few years. Apple Insider caught Wedbush analyst Daniel Ives on CNBC on Thursday. In a worst-case scenario, says the piece, Ives is expecting maybe a sales impact from the ban to be about 500,000 units. This is relative to what he says is 45 million units sold in total in China. Really, though, he thinks iPhone 15 sales in China are going to knock it out of the park, helped by relatively weak sales in the 2023 sales year. Mr. Ives has a buy rating on Apple shares. His price target on the shares is $230. An interesting iPhone 15 prediction today from Morgan Stanley. A piece from Apple Insider has that firm guessing that prices for most models in the iPhone 15 line will remain unchanged. Not so, though, if you want a Pro Max. The firm said in a note to investors, several competitors and news outlets predict an across-the-board pricing increase for iPhone 15, but we disagree. We believe Apple will leverage cheaper memory prices to keep pricing for all like-for-like SKUs unchanged year-on-year, except for the iPhone 15 Pro Max, where we are forecasting a $150 pricing increase due to the addition of the rear-facing periscope lens. As for the rest, Morgan Stanley thinks Apple raising prices across the board would likely drive incremental unit weakness, because of the downturn in smartphone sales. They don't think Apple's going to do it. The firm also differs from its compatriots on whether iPhone sales will disappoint, at least in terms of money made. Despite concerns of a muted iPhone 15 cycle, says the firm, we have conviction Apple revenues will grow year on year in fiscal year 24, given a growing installed base, easy year-on-year comparisons, pent-up demand, and positive mix shift driving ASP growth. That said, the firm does concede that iPhone pricing will be the most important detail at next week's Wonderlust event. Morgan Stanley has a buy rating on Apple shares. The firm's price target on the shares is $215. If you own an iPhone, an iPad, an Apple Watch, or a Mac, there are updates about which you need to know. Mac Rumors says Apple on Thursday released iOS and iPadOS 16.6.1, watchOS 9.6.2, and macOS 13.5.2. Each brings important security fixes. The iOS and iPadOS updates address two vulnerabilities, one tied to Image I/O and the other to the Wallet app. The watchOS update addresses the Wallet vulnerability, while the macOS update addresses the vulnerability in Image I/O. Apple says it is aware of reports that the two vulnerabilities across the 4 operating systems may have been actively exploited. No word on similar updates for operating systems running on older devices. We'll wrap the day with 2 tales from TV land. First, it may be a show about which Apple is truly excited. It may also just be a way around the writers and actors strikes here in the States. Whatever the case, Cult of Mac has word of the first series from Germany for Apple TV+. Where's Wanda is said to be a dark comedy. It tells the story of a couple whose 16-year-old daughter goes missing. After months of authorities not being able to find the girl, the couple enlists the help of their tech whiz son, go undercover as electrical workers, bug the neighborhood, and find that no one is who they purport to be. No word on when the show hits Apple TV+. Cult of Mac simply lists it as coming soon. And finally today, Apple TV Plus is giving viewers a closer look at the 4-part docuseries, The Supermodels, focused on the modeling careers of Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista, and Christy Turlington, as well as the work they have done since. The show hits Apple TV Plus on Wednesday, the 20th of September. With just under 2 weeks to go, the Cupertino streamer has released a trailer for the series. You can catch that now on YouTube. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media. Online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.